When I first saw the "For Sale" signs dotting the edge of my pasture, I thought it was some kind of prank. I'd owned those 22 acres for 12 years, and the last time I checked, they were zoned agricultural. No one in their right mind would call it prime residential land. It was uneven, muddy in spring, and bordered by a creek that flooded like clockwork every March. Yet there they were, bright red signs boasting luxury estates coming soon. Phase 1. The signs had the HOA's name printed neatly on the bottom. I didn't even live in an HOA. 2 days later, I found survey stakes hammered right through my field, pink ribbons flapping in the breeze. My first instinct was to laugh. Then I followed the stakes and realized they'd cut straight through my property line. The new phase of the Maple Ridge HOA development was quite literally being measured into my land. That laughter turned into something between disbelief and quiet rage. I pulled out my phone, checked the county records again, and confirmed what I already knew. The deed still had my name. I drove to the HOA office the next morning. It was a bland building next to a frozen yogurt shop, filled with the kind of beige furniture that screams self-importance. A woman in a pastel cardigan greeted me with the voice of someone who'd rehearsed being polite. When I explained that their construction surveyor was marking my property, she didn't even blink. "Oh," she said, tapping her computer. "Phase 4 expansion. The city approved that." "Approved on land I own?" I asked. She gave a little shrug. "You'll have to talk to our president, Mr. Harlan. He handles acquisitions." Acquisitions. Like my land was a business asset, not the field where my grandfather grazed cattle before I fenced it off for privacy. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. That night, I found bulldozers parked near the treeline. Not moving yet, but ready. I stood there under the porch light, arms crossed, watching their silhouettes against the sunset. I could have called the sheriff right then, but I didn't. I wanted to see how far they'd go before realizing what they'd stepped into. 3 weeks later, the ground was leveled. The HOA had paved a temporary road and framed 2 model homes. One of them stood squarely on my side of the property line, by about 60 feet. The workers said they were just following plans. The county clerk said the development permit had been submitted with updated coordinates. The coordinates, of course, were mine. I considered getting a lawyer immediately, but instead, I hired a surveyor first. When his report came back, it was perfect ammunition. Not only were the new homes partially on my property, but their storm drainage system dumped directly into my creek. They'd also trenched through my underground utility easement. If I'd wanted revenge right then, I could have shut off their water with a wrench and called it a day. But I had something better in mind. A week later, I showed up to one of their open houses. HOA President Arthur Harlan was there in his usual uniform, navy polo tucked into khakis, Bluetooth headset still in his ear even when he wasn't talking to anyone. He saw me standing in the entryway and frowned like I was muddying the carpet just by existing. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, scanning the place. "You're standing in my living room." He gave a polite, managerial laugh, the kind that says he's already decided I'm wrong. "I think you mean your old property line, sir. The expansion plans were reviewed by the county. Everything is perfectly legitimate. I've got a deed that disagrees." He waved a hand, dismissive. "You'll find that once a subdivision is approved, ownership is transitional. Paperwork catches up later. You'll get your compensation soon enough." "Compensation," I repeated, tasting the word like it was spoiled milk. "Of course. We always offer fair market value when private land is annexed." Annexed. Like I was some uncooperative province. I smiled and nodded, pretending to think it over. That's when I decided to play along. I signed the visitor sheet with my full name, just to make sure it was on record. Then I went home and did nothing. 4 weeks. Let them pour foundations, lay tile, plant decorative trees. I watched the model homes go up from my porch like someone watching a neighbor's slow-motion car crash. By the time they held the grand opening weekend, they had built 6 houses, 3 entirely on my land. Neighbors started showing up, moving boxes in, hanging wind chimes. They waved politely when they saw me at the fence. I waved back. They had no idea their dream homes were sitting on a ticking legal bomb. The first real sign of trouble came from a man named Greg, who introduced himself one morning as my new neighbor. He was friendly enough, engineer, young family, the kind of guy who bought into the HOA dream. He asked if he could extend his fence a few feet, for privacy. When I checked where he meant, I realized his entire yard was still on my parcel. That night, I drafted the letter. It was short, just 1 page. To the residents of Maple Ridge Phase 4, you are currently occupying private land belonging to my name. You have 30 days to vacate the property before legal action is initiated. Please direct inquiries to my attorney. I printed 20 copies and hand-delivered them into every shiny new mailbox. The panic started instantly. The next day, the HOA president stormed up my driveway in a rage, waving my letter like a flag. "You can't do this," he shouted. "I'm pretty sure I can," I said. "Want to see the deed again?" He demanded I sell immediately. Offered, above market value. I told him I'd consider it, if he made it a community event. "Have your board meet me," I said. "We'll talk about the future of Maple Ridge together." He smirked like he'd just outmaneuvered me. "Fine. We'll host you tomorrow evening." Perfect. The next day, I walked into their glossy HOA clubhouse with a folder tucked under my arm. They'd gathered around a long table, Harlan, the secretary, a realtor, a couple of the new homeowners looking pale. They tried to open with offers, but I cut them off. "I'm not here to negotiate," I said. "I'm here to inform you. Every single house built past this line," I slid a map across the table, "is on my property. You built on private agricultural land without a transfer of title. That means I legally own everything sitting on it." For the first time, Harlan didn't speak. The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. "So," I continued, leaning forward, "if you'd like to purchase the land, I'm open to it. But the price just went up. Way up." "How much?" someone asked. "Let's start at 4 times market rate. And I'll throw in a 60-day occupancy grace period." "You can't hold us hostage," Harlan hissed. "Hostage?" I smiled. "No. Just rent." And with that, I dropped the copy of the deed on the table. The weight of the paper echoed louder than any argument they could have made. I watched their faces fall as reality finally caught up to their arrogance. What they didn't know yet was that I'd already filed a temporary injunction that morning, freezing all property transfers in the development. Their dream homes were now legally untouchable, except by me. And that was just the beginning. By the time the HOA meeting ended, my phone was already buzzing. Half the residents from Phase 4 were in a group chat, panicking. I could almost picture them pacing inside their new homes, wondering if the walls themselves were now someone else's property. And they were right to wonder. By morning, I'd filed a notice of encroachment with the county recorder's office. It wasn't about the money yet, it was about leverage. 2 days later, I got the first visit. Greg, the friendly engineer, showed up again, this time looking pale and awkward. He had a folder in his hands and that tight smile people get when they're about to ask for something uncomfortable. "Hey," he said, "so, I guess there's some confusion about the land? Arthur told us it's a misunderstanding." "Arthur says a lot of things," I replied. He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I just bought this place. We put everything we had into it. My wife's freaking out, man. There's got to be a way to fix this." "There is," I said calmly. "But it's not free." I invited him inside and poured 2 coffees. I could see him trying to measure me. Was I a greedy landowner or a reasonable man with a grudge? I let him stew for a minute before speaking. "I'm not here to ruin anyone's life. But your HOA president made decisions that weren't his to make. So now I get to make mine." He leaned forward. "You're not kicking people out, are you?" "Not yet. Depends on how your president handles this." When he left, I knew exactly what he'd do: run straight to the HOA, tell them I was open to negotiation, and try to play the mediator. Perfect. That afternoon, Arthur himself appeared again, this time without the fake charm. "I don't appreciate you terrorizing my residents," he said, stepping onto my porch uninvited. "I don't appreciate your bulldozers trespassing," I shot back. He clenched his jaw. "You know, if you'd just signed the sale paperwork when we offered last year, none of this would have happened." That made me pause. "Last year?" He smirked. "You missed the letter. We made a formal offer. You never responded, so the board assumed abandonment of intent to retain the land. It's a standard clause." I laughed out loud. "You think silence is consent? In the development world, it's progress," he said. That was the moment I realized how deep his arrogance went. He wasn't just careless. He truly believed the HOA could take whatever it wanted as long as it had pretty paperwork behind it. "Tell you what, Arthur," I said. "You keep thinking that way. It'll make the court hearing even more entertaining." He scoffed and stormed off, his car kicking gravel down my driveway. I waited 3 days, then dropped the next domino. I sent certified letters not just to the HOA but to each homeowner, stating that the structures on my land were unauthorized improvements and would be subject to removal or lease renegotiation under my discretion. I also CC'd the county tax office, so every homeowner's tax assessment now flagged for review. Nothing panics an HOA faster than bureaucratic uncertainty. By the end of the week, Maple Ridge Phase 4 looked like a crime scene. Realtors stopped showing the remaining homes. Buyers backed out of contracts. Construction trucks vanished overnight. And Arthur? He went silent. Too silent. Then, one evening around sunset, I saw something odd. A convoy of pickup trucks rolled up near the half-finished lot. Workers unloaded rebar and concrete mixers. No permits, no city vehicles, no inspectors. Just men trying to look busy before the sun went down. I walked over, hands in my jacket pockets. "Evening," I said casually. "You boys got permits for this?" A foreman blinked at me. "We were told to finish drainage before the inspection." "Who told you that?" He hesitated. "Mr. Harlan." Of course. The man was trying to finish construction before the legal freeze fully kicked in. I took out my phone, snapped photos of the vehicles, plates, and crew, then called the sheriff's office. Not 911, just the local number. I gave my name, parcel number, and told them I had unpermitted construction on private property. 20 minutes later, a deputy pulled up. The workers scattered like pigeons. When Arthur arrived, red-faced and furious, the deputy was already standing beside me. "Sir, this man claims ownership of this property," the deputy said, reading his notepad. "He's got the deed here, too." Arthur tried to spin it, babbling about development timelines and county approvals, but the deputy cut him off. "You can argue that in civil court. But right now, these vehicles need to clear out." Watching those trucks back down the dirt path under police escort was better than coffee. Over the next week, the HOA cracked. Half the residents started demanding refunds. The other half blamed Arthur for mishandling negotiations. Then came the news I'd been waiting for. The bank financing Phase 4 construction froze their funding pending the title dispute. Overnight, the HOA's golden project turned radioactive. But I wasn't done. I called a lawyer named Vivian Blackwater, a sharp real estate attorney I'd worked with years ago when someone tried to dispute an easement on my creek. Vivian was calm, ruthless, and terrifyingly efficient. Within 3 days, she had filed a full civil complaint. Unauthorized construction, environmental violation, property encroachment, and, my favorite, malicious misrepresentation. Arthur called me the next day, suddenly polite again. "Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot," he said. "Oh, we didn't," I replied. "You just ran out of leverage." He sighed. "Can we talk settlement?" "Sure," I said. "You're welcome to submit an offer. But from now on, everything goes through my attorney." The pause on the other end was priceless. He knew exactly what that meant. Within a week, Vivian forwarded me their settlement proposal. They offered me twice the original land value to transfer ownership and waive claims. I declined. Politely. Then she sent back a counteroffer. 8 times market value, plus reimbursement for survey fees, legal costs, and monthly rent retroactive to the date of encroachment. Arthur lost it. He called personally again, voice shaking. "You're robbing us blind." "No," I said. "I'm just charging rent for the houses you built on my land. Seems fair." That's when he made his biggest mistake yet. "If you think you can hold this community hostage, you're wrong. We'll find a way around you." "Arthur," I said quietly, "you already did. That's why you're standing in my shadow." 2 days later, the HOA tried to file an emergency petition with the county to claim necessity rights over the land, arguing that displacing residents would cause undue hardship. Vivian shredded it before the ink dried. The county clerk laughed when she saw the request. It was legally nonsense. The following Monday, I drove past the Phase 4 gate. Half the houses stood empty. The once manicured lawns were yellowing, "For sale" signs tilting in the wind. A few families still clung to hope, their porch lights flickering at night like stubborn candles in a storm. That night, I sat on my porch with a beer, watching their streetlights glow from my hilltop. I should have felt pure satisfaction, but instead, I felt something more complicated. They weren't all villains, just people sold a dream built on stolen land. But Arthur? He'd chosen this path. The next morning, Vivian called. "They blinked," she said. "They're ready to pay full value plus rent. But there's a catch." "Let me guess," I said. "They want me to keep quiet about it." "Exactly." I smiled. "Then we'll make it public." By noon, the story hit the local paper. "Developer faces lawsuit for building on private land." The article quoted court records, complete with maps showing the overlap. I didn't have to say a word. The public humiliation did it for me. Arthur resigned from the HOA board within 48 hours. The bank canceled the rest of the construction loan. The homeowners, realizing they'd been duped, started forming their own class action lawsuit against him. And I still hadn't sold the land. Because now, it wasn't about the money. It was about what came next. The first real calm after the storm came about 2 weeks later, when the county officially froze all construction permits in Maple Ridge Phase 4. It was surreal. One day there were contractors hammering away at new foundations, and the next, silence. The only sounds left were wind through unfinished frames and the occasional dog barking at an empty cul-de-sac. I should have felt victorious, but part of me couldn't stop watching what came next, how the HOA would try to clean up their own mess. Greg came by again one morning, nervously clutching a clipboard. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. "So, people are starting to get letters," he said. "Some homeowners, they're scared you'll bulldoze their houses." I smiled. "Tell them to relax. I don't destroy homes, I lease them." He blinked, trying to process that. "Lease them? You mean, rent the land out?" "Exactly," I said. "If they want to stay, they can pay fair rent. I'll even give them long-term leases with renewal rights. But the HOA's done. They'll answer to me directly." He stared at me, the gears in his head turning. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," I said. "Why let a corrupt board profit off my mistake when I can turn it into a business?" That night, I typed up formal lease offers for every homeowner, 30 pages each, carefully worded by Vivian's paralegal team. It was a trap, but a clean one. The leases would remove the HOA's authority entirely and transfer maintenance, utilities, and easement control to me. In exchange, the residents could live peacefully and legally on the land. Some would hate it, some would love it, all would divide, and divided communities can't fight back. Within a week, 5 households signed. Greg was one of them. The HOA board panicked. Arthur's replacement, a woman named Leslie Crane, tried to rally the others, insisting my leases were illegal coercion. The irony nearly made me choke on my coffee. Then she made a public statement during a community meeting. "This man," she said, waving one of my letters, "is attempting to extort homeowners using fear tactics. We will not be intimidated." Except the meeting wasn't private anymore. A local news crew had picked up the story, filming from the sidewalk. Leslie's speech turned into a PR disaster. The footage showed her shouting, red-faced, while Greg calmly told the reporter, "I read the lease. It's fair. It gives us stability. The HOA never showed us the real land records, he did." That single clip changed everything. By the next weekend, half the neighborhood signed my leases. The other half started asking for clarification. The HOA's grip slipped like sand through fingers. But Leslie wasn't going down quietly. A few days later, I came home to find new signs posted along the gravel road leading to my property. "Private HOA road, trespassers will be towed." My mailbox had a neon orange sticker on it reading, "Unregistered occupant." It was almost funny. Almost. I peeled off the sticker, called Vivian, and she laughed so hard I had to hold the phone away. "You know that's interference with recorded property use, right?" she said. "They basically gift-wrapped a defamation claim for you." She drafted a cease and desist notice the same day. I printed it on thick paper, folded it neatly, and hand-delivered it to the HOA office the next morning. The front desk clerk, same pastel cardigan woman, went pale when she saw my name. "Please give this to Miss Crane," I said. "She's not in," she whispered. "Then tape it to her door." "I'll wait." She did. I watched from my truck as Leslie walked in 10 minutes later, saw the envelope, and froze. For a moment she looked like she might cry. Then she tore it open, read the header, and her shoulders slumped. The next day the signs disappeared. The sticker war was over before it began. But I knew better than to think it was done. HOAs don't die, they mutate. And sure enough, a week later, I got an anonymous letter in my mailbox. No return address, typed message, postmarked from the next town over. It read, "You think you've won, but you'll regret what you did to this community. We built our lives here. You're nothing without us." I chuckled, slid it into a drawer, and kept it. Threats have value, they reveal desperation. A few days later, Greg texted me something interesting. He'd overheard a group of HOA loyalists at the coffee shop talking about meeting off the record. Apparently, Leslie was gathering signatures to appeal the county freeze and pressure the zoning office to void my land deed. That was impossible legally, but politics doesn't need legality, just noise. So I made some noise of my own. I invited every leaseholder to my property that Saturday for what I called an open discussion about the community's future. When they arrived, they found tents, barbecue, music, and a huge banner reading, "Maple Ridge Residents Appreciation Picnic," hosted by the actual landowner. It was petty. It was perfect. Families showed up cautiously, then started relaxing when they realized it wasn't a protest. I served brisket and lemonade. Kids played near the fence line. Even a few fence-sitters from the HOA side wandered over, pretending they were just curious. At dusk, I stood on a small platform and gave a short speech. "I don't want enemies," I told them. "You bought homes in good faith. I get that. You deserve peace of mind. I'm not here to ruin your community, I'm here to make it fair again." The applause surprised me. Even Greg looked proud. But across the street, I saw Leslie watching from her car, expression hard as stone. She didn't stay long. That night, the HOA board group chat exploded. Greg forwarded me screenshots. The messages were chaos. Accusations, insults, threats of resignations. Leslie tried to hold them together, but it was like watching a dam crack under pressure. The board finally dissolved 2 days later. No one wanted to touch the lawsuit or the bad publicity anymore. I thought that would be the end of it. Then the real estate developer reappeared. Not Arthur this time, someone higher. His name was Richard Leland, the regional partner for Oakvale Properties, the company that had funded the entire Maple Ridge project. He showed up at my door unannounced, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than my truck. His smile was pure diplomacy. "Mr. Reed," he said smoothly, "you've certainly caused a stir." I leaned on the railing. "That makes two of us." He didn't flinch. "I've read the court filings. Impressive work. But litigation hurts everyone. I propose something simpler." He handed me a folder. Inside was a new offer, astronomical, nearly triple even Vivian's last counterproposal. My land, plus a consulting role as community liaison. A salary. They wanted me inside the machine. "Interesting," I said. "So now I'm valuable." "You always were," he said, tone even. "You just didn't know how to play the game." I closed the folder and handed it back. "Oh, I know how. I just prefer playing to win." He gave a thin smile. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," I said. "But it's mine to make." When he left, the porch light flickered. The night felt colder. The next morning, I woke to find a county code enforcement truck parked at my gate. 2 officers were measuring something near my culvert. I stepped outside and asked what was going on. One of them said, "Anonymous report. Possible zoning violation." I smiled. Of course. Leland had gone dirty. They left without issuing anything, but the message was clear. I'd poked a giant that wasn't used to losing. That night, I sat on my porch again, watching the half-lit houses in the distance. My land had become a chessboard, one I owned, but one others still thought they could control. I sipped my beer, felt the wind shift, and muttered to myself, "All right then, Richard. Let's play." Because if they wanted escalation, I had plenty more moves left. And the next one would change everything. The first thing Richard Leland didn't understand about me was that I don't bluff. When he sent that code enforcement truck, he thought he was reminding me who had the deeper pockets. But I wasn't fighting for profit anymore. I was fighting for the principle of being underestimated. And that, as Vivian liked to say, made me the most dangerous kind of broke man, one with patience. Within a week, I saw more of their little stunt. A county noise complaint appeared in my mailbox even though I hadn't had music playing since the picnic. Then a notice of potential runoff violation arrived, citing my creek as a possible contamination source. It was laughable. I kept every letter in a neat folder labeled Desperation. Vivian analyzed each one. "They're probing," she said over the phone. "Trying to wear you down with bureaucracy until you take the buyout. Don't react. Document everything." "Already doing it," I said. "But I've got a better idea." "Do tell," she said warily. "You remember those storm drains they built? The ones dumping into my creek?" Her silence lasted 3 beats. Then, "You're not planning what I think you're planning." "Nothing illegal," I said. "Just educational." The next morning, I called a friend from my university days, Tyler, now a civil engineer who owed me a favor. He came by with equipment, took water samples from the drainage points, and found what I expected: sediment and concrete slurry leaching from unfinished HOA lot. It was an environmental violation waiting to happen. Vivian grinned when I told her. "You're going to make them pay for their own runoff, aren't you?" "Better," I said. "I'm going to make the state do it for me." We submitted the report to the Department of Environmental Quality under my name as a landowner complaint. 3 days later, inspectors swarmed the site like bees. By sunset, the HOA's construction permit was suspended pending remediation. Trucks were forced off-site. The newspaper ran another headline: "Maple Ridge expansion halted again, contamination found on private land." Richard must have nearly choked on his espresso. That evening, I got an email from him, short, clipped, professional. "Mr. Reed, this antagonism helps no one. Let's discuss a mutually beneficial resolution before this escalates further." I didn't reply. I wanted escalation. The next morning, Greg stopped by again, bringing fresh donuts and nervous energy. "They're saying you poisoned the creek," he said quietly. "Of course they are," I said. "That's what guilty people do, Project." He sighed. Half the neighborhood's with you. The other half's terrified you'll shut off their access road next. I leaned back. Terrified people make great negotiators. He frowned, uncomfortable. You're enjoying this too much. Not enjoying, I said. Just balancing the scales. Later that week, I finally agreed to meet Richard again. This time at the county mediation office. Neutral ground. The conference room was sterile, the kind of place where hope goes to suffocate. He was waiting with a briefcase and a practiced smile. Mr. Reed, he began, gesturing for me to sit. Let's be reasonable. You've proven your point. You own the land. You're a smart man. But dragging this out helps no one. Depends on your definition of help, I said. He slid a new folder across the table. Revised offer. Triple market value, plus a confidentiality clause. You walk away clean. No lawsuits, no press. I flipped through it slowly, not because I needed to, Vivian had already told me what to expect, but because silence unnerves men like him. After a minute, I looked up. I've got a counteroffer. He leaned forward, interested. You pay me 10 times market rate, I said, and you donate a community park named after my grandfather, the man who bought this land before your company even existed. His jaw flexed. That's not a serious proposal. It's the only one on the table, I said. He chuckled softly, the kind of laugh meant to hide irritation. You're not thinking like a businessman. I'm not one, I replied. I'm a landowner. You built on my land. You want to fix it? You pay for the history you ignored. The mediator cleared his throat awkwardly. Richard stood up, muttering something about unreasonable demands, and stormed out. I stayed seated, finished my coffee, and said to the mediator, "That went well." He blinked. "That's your definition of well?" "Absolutely," I said. "He's out of patience. That's when people make mistakes." And sure enough, 2 days later, they did. I woke to the sound of engines, big ones. When I stepped outside, I saw heavy machinery lined up near the creek again, bright floodlights cutting through the morning fog. Workers were installing new drainage pipes, clearly ignoring the suspension order. I took photos, videos, timestamps, everything. Then I called Vivian. "Send it," she said. "Straight to the DQ and the paper." By noon, an inspector and a journalist stood on site together. By evening, the HOA got hit with a ceasework order and a $75,000 fine for unauthorized construction. The local headline the next day read, "Developer violates court order, faces criminal inquiry." That's when Richard finally lost his composure. He called me personally, voice sharp enough to cut steel. "You think you've won, but you've made powerful enemies, Mr. Reed." I laughed. "So did your bulldozers." "You're not untouchable," he warned. "No one is." "Maybe not," I said. "But my land is." And I hung up. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. But peace doesn't last long in a war of pride. 3 nights later, someone vandalized my property. I woke to find tire tracks gouged into my pasture, my mailbox smashed, and spray paint across my fence. Sell or else. I stood there at sunrise, staring at the red letters. My first reaction wasn't anger, it was clarity. They were scared. I called the sheriff's office, filed a report, and sent photos to Vivian. "Classic intimidation," she said. "Document it, but don't retaliate." I nodded, though I didn't promise. Retaliation was kind of my thing. Instead, I got creative. I installed floodlights, motion cameras, and a large metal sign at my gate that read, "Private property under federal easement review." It was technically true. The environmental case had triggered federal oversight. But the phrase "federal review" has a magical way of stopping people dead. For a week, everything went quiet again. The HOA board officially disbanded. The remaining residents started paying rent directly to my management account. Even the ones who hated me seemed relieved to have some certainty. Greg told me the neighborhood was almost peaceful. Then, one evening, as I was feeding my dog, I noticed a black SUV idling by the road. It didn't move for nearly 10 minutes. I walked toward it slowly, phone recording. When I got close enough to see the tinted window roll down, Richard's voice came through. "You win," he said flatly. "That easy?" I asked. He exhaled hard. "You're bleeding us dry. The board's done. Investors are panicking. Fine, you want the park? You got it. Just sign the transfer and release us from liability." "I'll think about it," I said, enjoying the words more than I should have. He gave a tight nod and drove off. The SUV disappeared into the dark, leaving tire grooves on the gravel like a signature. I stood there a long time, letting the quiet settle. I'd expected to feel triumph, but what I felt was something heavier. The land was mine again, sure, but now it carried ghosts of their arrogance. Half-built dreams. Faded "for sale" signs. A park wouldn't erase that, but maybe it would mark the turning point, the moment greed finally tripped over its own ego. The next morning, I called Vivian. "He's ready to cave," I said. "Good," she said. "Then let's make sure he does it on paper." And as she drafted the new agreement, I couldn't help but think, this story wasn't over yet. Because if there's one thing I've learned about power, it's that people like Richard never surrender. They retreat, regroup, and come back smarter. And when they did, I planned to be waiting. The deal with Richard should have ended everything, but I've learned that men like him never stop trying to rewrite endings. For about 2 months, things actually seemed calm. The papers were signed, the lawsuit was quietly withdrawn, and the park, Reed Heritage Green, as the final nameplate read, was officially announced at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Richard gave a speech about community partnership and forward-looking stewardship, every syllable dripping with PR polish. I stood there in the back, wearing my old work jacket, applauding just loud enough to be polite. Vivian had warned me that the clause giving me naming rights didn't mean they'd let me rest. "Developers hate losing face," she said. "They'll find some loophole to reclaim the narrative." She wasn't wrong. A few weeks later, I got a call from Greg. "They're selling again," he said. "Different name. Different LLC. Same developer." Sure enough, a new banner appeared by the road. "Leland Properties presents Creekside Reserve, starting at $600,000. I almost laughed. They hadn't even waited a full quarter. Same land, same drainage system, same empty promises, just a rebrand. I walked over that evening. Workers were putting up new stakes again, just a few feet over the line, pretending to survey. When I asked who'd authorized the site, the foreman said, "County approved Phase 5 construction." "Funny," I said. "Because the county zoning board's chair is my cousin. Want to try that again?" He blinked, hesitated, then muttered something about temporary boundary checks, before ordering his crew back into the truck. They left in under 10 minutes. I called Vivian, and her laughter nearly shook the phone. "They're that predictable?" "They're that arrogant," I said. "They think renaming the company resets the legal history." We double-checked the filings, and sure enough, Creekside Reserve LLC was registered just 6 weeks after the injunction lifted. The board members were the same, only shuffled around like cards. And the land they wanted to expand into? The narrow strip between my creek and the park. My land. Again. That night, I drove out to the ridge overlooking the development. The sun was going down, throwing gold across the empty lots. And I decided then, if they wanted to build on history again, I'd make sure they built on mud this time. The next morning, I called Tyler, the engineer. "Remember how that area floods every spring?" I asked. "Yeah. You want me to prove it?" "I want you to document it," I said. "Thoroughly." Within days, we had drone footage, floodplain overlays, and soil saturation reports. Vivian attached everything to a new environmental review request. It was airtight. If Creekside Reserve even tried to apply for a construction permit, the state would flag it as high-risk development. I thought that would stop them. But Richard didn't play defense. He played politics. One morning, I opened the newspaper to find an op-ed titled, rural landowner blocking affordable housing initiative. My name wasn't printed directly, but the implication was crystal clear. An uncooperative local was hindering sustainable community growth. The piece quoted anonymous county sources, claiming I'd rejected reasonable development efforts. Vivian called an hour later. "They're trying to paint you as the villain." I laughed bitterly. Classic play. When you can't win the land, win the story. "Do you want me to issue a public statement?" "No," I said. "Let them talk. I'll show them the truth." A week later, the truth arrived in the form of rain. Heavy, endless rain. The kind that turns dirt to soup and driveways into rivers. Creekside reserves, survey trenches, filled like bathtubs. Their construction road sank under its own weight. I didn't lift a finger. Nature did all the work. By the third day of rain, the local news helicopter filmed the flooded lots from above. The footage showed the park high and dry, my park, while the new development sat underwater. The irony was perfect. The same outlet that ran the hit piece now aired a segment titled, "Proposed Creekside Homes Underwater Before Construction Begins." Greg texted me a photo of the headline with 3 words, "Poetic justice, man." I couldn't disagree. But even drowning doesn't stop sharks. Richard reappeared, this time at the County Zoning Appeal Board, claiming that I had deliberately altered water flow from the park to sabotage the site. It was absurd, but he had lawyers and lobbyists, and absurdity sounds convincing when it wears a suit. Vivian and I attended the hearing together. It was packed. Residents, reporters, even a few familiar HOA faces who now watched like spectators at a boxing match. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. "The land floods because it's a floodplain," I said. "You don't build a house in a swamp and then sue the rain." The room chuckled. Even the zoning chair couldn't suppress a smile. Vivian then presented the soil studies and drone footage. By the time she finished, Richard's side looked like kids caught cheating on a test. The board denied their appeal unanimously. That night, I found an envelope taped to my gate. No stamp, just a short note. "You won again. Congratulations." But even kings fall when they forget the ground beneath them. No signature, but I knew the tone. "Richard." Vivian wanted me to report it. I didn't bother. Petty threats meant they were out of moves. For the next month, the development stayed dead. No trucks, no workers, no noise. Greg said people were finally settling into peace again, and the community had started to rebuild, without the HOA. Neighbors held their own barbecues, managed their own issues, and for the first time, there wasn't a single complaint about fence height violations. It almost felt like a happy ending. Until the letter from the bank arrived. It was addressed to property owner, Parcel 18C, one of the old disputed lots now within my boundary. Inside was a notice. Foreclosure proceedings pending due to developer default. The bank was repossessing the half-built structures, and as legal owner of the land beneath them, I was suddenly a stakeholder in assets I never wanted. Vivian found it hilarious. "Congratulations," she said. "You now own 3 unfinished luxury homes." "Perfect," I said dryly. "Maybe I'll rent them out to people who don't believe in HOAs." But then I had a better idea. Instead of selling or demolishing them, I restored one. Fixed the wiring, replaced the drywall, painted the exterior deep forest green, the opposite of the HOA's sterile beige palette. Then I hung a sign out front, "For lease, no HOA." No nonsense. It went viral online within a week. Someone posted a photo on Reddit under the caption, "When your landlord owns the HOA." The comments exploded. Thousands of likes, endless memes, even a few interviews requests. I declined them all, but the point had been made. My story wasn't just local anymore, it was public folklore. Richard called again after that, voice weary but still trying to sound powerful. "You turned this into a circus," he said. "No," I said. "You did. I just sold tickets. You've embarrassed everyone involved." "I did them a favor," I said. Now no one else will try to build where they don't belong." He was quiet for a long time, then said softly, "You could have taken the money and walked away." "Maybe," I said. "But then what would I have learned?" The line went dead. That evening, I stood on my porch again, watching the park lights flicker across the wet grass. Kids played on swings named after my grandfather. Families walked dogs along the path where bulldozers once stood. And across the creek, those half-built shells stood silent, monuments to arrogance. I knew Richard wasn't finished. Men like him don't quit, they regroup. But I wasn't the same man he'd first tried to manipulate. I'd learned the game, and worse for him, I'd learned to enjoy it. So I raised my glass to the dark horizon and whispered, "Go ahead, Richard. Make your next move." Because this time, I wasn't defending my land. I was defending the principle that made it mine. And the war wasn't over yet. By the time spring rolled around again, Maple Ridge looked nothing like the glossy HOA brochures that once promised luxury lakeside living. The model homes stood half empty, the asphalt cracked from neglect, and the park, my park, had become the only part of the development that people actually love. Families from outside the community came every weekend for picnics and kite flying. Kids splashed in the shallow part of the creek where the water ran clear again. It was everything the HOA claimed to stand for, except it wasn't built by control, it was built by correction. I was sitting on my porch one warm Saturday morning when Greg drove up in his dusty pickup. He'd traded his pressed HOA polo shirts for flannel and jeans, the kind of look that said he'd finally shed the suburban armor. "You might want to see this," he said, handing me a printed email. It was from the County Planning Commission. "Creekside Reserve has filed for bankruptcy protection. Assets pending liquidation." I let out a low whistle. Guess the empire finally ran out of credit. Greg grinned. "There's more. They're holding a liquidation auction for all remaining parcels, buildings, materials, everything. Thought you'd want to attend." "Oh, I'll be there," I said. Front row. The auction was held 3 weeks later in a repurposed community hall downtown. I walked in wearing the same jacket I'd worn to that first HOA meeting, the one Arthur called farm gear. I wanted them to remember exactly who they'd underestimated. The place was filled with familiar faces. Contractors, investors, a few wary homeowners, even a couple of city officials pretending not to gawk. And in the front row, sitting with a tight jaw and perfect posture, was Richard Leland. His suit looked as expensive as ever, but his eyes had that distant glassiness of someone who'd lost more than money. He'd lost belief in his own invincibility. When the auctioneer started calling out parcels, the bidding was brisk at first. Developers trying to snatch scraps of what was left. But then came the lots that mattered. The 3 unfinished houses sitting squarely on my land. The auctioneer started low at 50,000. I raised my hand. "Bid accepted 50, he said. "Do I hear 60? No one else moved. The silence stretched until even the auctioneer hesitated. 50 going once, twice. "Sold," I said quietly when the gavel came down. The next 2 houses went the same way. I bought them for less than the price of a used truck. Richard didn't bid, didn't flinch. He just watched, one hand clenched around his pen until his knuckles went white. After the auction ended, I walked over to him. "Funny thing about land," I said. "It doesn't care who signs the paperwork. It only remembers who respects it." He looked up at me, eyes tired. "You think you've won." "I don't think," I said. "I know." He gave a small, humorless smile. "You'll get tired. Sooner or later, you'll want peace more than pride." "Then it's a good thing I've got both," I said. That night, I drove home past the dark shells of Creekside Reserve and parked outside what was now, officially, mine. The luxury Model A still had staging furniture inside, dust-covered but intact. I walked through the empty rooms, the hollow echoes of ambition clinging to the drywall. It was eerie, standing where strangers once bragged about quartz countertops and open-concept living. Then I saw it, something tucked behind a kitchen cabinet. A small file box, forgotten in the rush. Inside were paperwork copies, deeds, surveys, emails, and among them, one folder marked Internal Correspondence, Maple Ridge Phase 4. Inside, a letterhead from Oakvale Properties with Richard's signature. It was a directive dated a year before construction began. Adjust parcel coordinates to reflect projected expansion. Expedite approval, owner compensation to follow. He'd ordered it himself. No misunderstanding, no clerical error, just premeditated theft, hidden under polite corporate jargon. I took the folder straight to Vivian the next morning. Her eyes widened as she read it. "This is criminal, not civil," she said. "You could take this to the DA." "Do it," I said. The investigation started within a week. The county DA opened a case for falsified documents and fraudulent permit acquisition. Richard tried to spin it as administrative oversight, but the paper trail was clear. The board members turned on him fast, each one claiming ignorance and leaking more evidence to save themselves. When the indictment finally came through, the local paper ran the headline like a victory banner. "Developer indicted in land fraud scandal, whistleblower local man credited for discovery." Greg brought over a copy and grinned like a proud kid. "You're practically a folk hero now," he said. "Don't jinx it," I said. "Folk heroes usually die broke." But secretly it felt good. For the first time, justice wasn't theoretical, it was measurable. The bulldozers that once roared across my fields were now parked in impound lots, and the men who ordered them were giving depositions. Still, I didn't gloat. Instead, I built. Over the next few months, I converted the 3 half-finished homes into something useful. One became a community workshop, free for locals who wanted to fix fences, build sheds, or just learn carpentry. Another became a rental cabin for families who needed short-term housing after flood season. The third, the one closest to the creek, I turned into a small library stocked with donated books. Word spread fast. People started calling it Reed's Ridge. The name stuck. One afternoon, I was painting the library's front steps when a car pulled up. It was Leslie Crane, the former HOA president who'd once called me a neighborhood threat. She stepped out slowly, holding a box. "Peace offering," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "That's a first." She smiled faintly. "I was wrong about you. About all of this. The HOA was supposed to build community. You actually did." I took the box. Inside were old HOA documents, newsletters, and minutes. "Thought you might want these for the history books," she said. For the first time, I saw sincerity in her eyes. "Thanks," I said. "It means more than you think." When she left, I sat on the porch of the little library, watching the sun drop behind the hills. The creek glowed amber, and the park lights flickered on one by one. It hit me then. This land had outlasted everyone's greed. It had been fenced, paved, flooded, and fought over, but it was still here. Still mine. Still steady. Weeks later, the trial against Richard made the front page again. He pleaded no contest. Corporate fraud, falsification of records, environmental negligence. A suspended sentence, massive fines, lifetime ban from real estate licensing. Justice, maybe not perfect, but poetic. Vivian called afterward. "Congratulations," she said. "You just buried a corporation with paperwork." "Fitting, isn't it?" I said. "They built their empire on paper. I just used thicker stock." She laughed. "So what now, Marcus?" "Now," I said, "I build something real." And that's exactly what I did. Over the next year, Reed's Ridge became more than a story. Volunteers helped expand the park trail, and we turned the old HOA clubhouse into a community center. No board meetings, no fines, no architectural committees, just neighbors helping neighbors. Kids painted murals on the old retaining wall. Someone planted fruit trees. A retired teacher ran reading sessions for kids on weekends. Every so often, a realtor still called, offering unbelievable sums for the land. I just smile and hang up. Because some land isn't for sale. Some land remembers every argument, every threat, every document forged in greed, and it holds grudges the way soil holds roots. Sometimes I still think about Richard. Last I heard, he moved out west, trying to start over in commercial consulting. I don't hate him anymore. In a strange way, he taught me how to fight without raising my voice, how to win without destroying myself in the process. One evening, near the anniversary of the first bulldozer breaking ground, I stood on the ridge overlooking the park. The air smelled like pine and rain. The laughter of families drifted up through the trees. I pulled out the old folded deed, creases worn, ink faded, and ran my thumb over my grandfather's signature. He'd bought this land because he wanted space to breathe. I fought for it because I refused to let arrogance steal that breath away. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized something simple. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's permanence. The HOA built their dream homes on my land. They thought they could by legacy. But legacy can't be built. It's earned, one stubborn stand at a time. And as long as I'm here, this land will remember.